Atari wasn't the very first home video game console. That honor goes to the Magnavox Odyssey. But it was the first video game system to enjoy widespread success. It was also the first one to endure an abysmal fall from grace. It was such a spectacular fall that it's surprising that future companies such as Sega and Hudson Soft didn't learn from their mistake. Atari's first proper console was the 2600, released in 1977. Much like Nintendo dominated the 80s, the Atari 2600 was the item that every kid begged for as a Christmas or birthday present. It had its competing systems from rival companies, but if you don't know who they are, then you know why they failed to match Atari's success. Atari was on cloud 9, but just like Icarus, they flew too close to the sun. When the 2600 was 5 years old in 1982, Atari introduced its successor model, the 5200. While it was a graphical improvement over the 2600, the big complaint was that it wasn't backwards compatible, and the controllers are generally regarded as some of the worst. It's no surprise that this, the civil war in Atari's company, and the oncoming video game crash led to the system being discontinued rather shortly. Fast forward to 1986, and Atari released its next model, the 7800. While it trailed behind Nintendo's NES, it did enjoy a respectable amount of success, being discontinued in 1991. Its biggest draw was its compatibility with 2600 games and upgraded graphics. But only a year later, Atari made another model, the XEGS. This must have confused already bewildered consumers and didn't help Atari win any fans. In 1986, the company Epyx designed a handheld that would be licensed by Atari, which would lead to the release of the Atari Lynx in 1989. Alongside the Game Gear and Turbo Express, it competed against Nintendo's newly released Game Boy. On paper, all these systems crushed the Game Boy in terms of graphics and sound, but a lack of great titles, bulky design, and anemic battery life led to their eventual downfall. It should be noted that while it couldn't compete with the Game Boy, the Lynx enjoyed a fair amount of popularity. In 1991, the Lynx 2 was introduced, addressing most of the problems that plagued the first model. But in 1993, Atari dropped any plans for developing their handheld market to focus on their final system. Atari simultaneously worked on a 32-bit system called the Panther and a 64-bit system called the Jaguar. Because development on the Jaguar progressed faster, the Panther was shelved. Alongside the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar was released in 1993. For its technical specifications, the Jaguar has awful-looking graphics compared to technically inferior 16-bit systems. The Jaguar was billed as a 64-bit system, but it was actually two 32-bit GPUs called Tom and Jerry that were managed by a 16-bit CPU. Most developers, though, didn't use it as it was intended and focused more on making the 16-bit CPU do all the hard work. This is why so many Jaguar games look like ugly Super Nintendo games. The Jaguar fell dead in last place among console systems of the era. Even the 3DO, while doing terrible, was that much more better off than Atari's swan-song system. Atari closed shop on home systems afterwards. While the Jaguar was plagued with problems, it does enjoy a certain amount of popularity in the homebrew community. When the Jaguar was declared an open-source system by Hasbro, members of the homebrew community went nuts. Also, as classic releases of retro systems became popular, Atari did fairly well. As late as 2017, rumors of a new Atari system have been mumbled across the internet. Will the sleeping giant awake more powerful than before? We'll just have to wait and see.